He probably did them more or less at the same time. I mean, there isn't one period when he did just angular ones, and then one period when he did very curvilinear ones, or one period he did very soft edge, and other times when he sort of defines the edges very sharply.
When these abstract forms go from the mushrooms and the smallest, tiniest creatures or twigs in the forest floor, when he takes those and he takes them to the outer space and to these cosmic images, and you see some of the same forms that have been going on, that's when you get the connection. This is the beauty and the mystery of life. Understand it, love it, respect it.
The word artist means creator. It means the ability to catch fire at some manifestation of nature, and the faculty of bringing the emotion into some form of controlled expression. W.H. Stevens has a touch of this quality, and in particular has a feeling for airiness and skies. The New York Sun.
After the Depression, it was harder and harder for artists to sell their work, but he was exhibiting with some regularity. One of the tragedies of his life was he had a very good show in New York in the summer of 1941, and then it was so successful, and he sold, and actually the Boston Museum of Fine Art bought one of his paintings, that he had two shows in November. They opened in late November of 1941, and this was when Pearl Harbor happened. After 1941, galleries everywhere were having a hard time selling, but he was getting some attention.
We know that Stevens is a philosopher as well as an artist, and that he recreates many of the actual scenes in his own mind's eye. Yet they are no more modern than much of the work today, and some are even almost realistic in their interpretation. Add to this indefinable something beautiful harmonies and subtle gradations of tone, exquisite design, something abstract and something made of living objects, and a keen sense of good taste, and we have Stevens' work. The Cincinnati Times-Star.
He came to know Joseph Albers and some of the people in Black Mountain College, which at that time, as you know, was a very avant-garde, experimental institution.
Albers was a huge fan of Will Henry Stevens' work. I think Albers recognized in Stevens' later work the non-objective work, a kindred spirit, a kindred intellectual spirit. Will Henry Stevens had a show in the mid-40s at Black Mountain College.
After it was over, Albers wrote him a very nice letter.
I myself and a number of us have enjoyed your paintings very much. I'm impressed with your sensitive musicality for color and your ability to handle a multitude of forms and to combine them to an organic whole. In my painting class, we have discussed and analyzed these qualities not too often respected in modern painting, and I am sure that many artists could learn from you about color and composition.
He didn't sell any paintings at that exhibition, but I think he was very pleased about it and treasured that letter. So why don't we know more about him? I think it's because he really wasn't really in the New York scene. In his last years, he was much admired, and when there were a couple of shows right before he retired, a year or two, that were, I think one of them said something like 500 people came. But he was very popular locally.
Stevens has found opportunity to think and evolve a way of life that's expressed in his paintings. Unlike many non-objective painters of modern times, he hasn't sought attention through bizarre and startling effects, nor does he show a desire to make propaganda. Quietly, with deep feeling and honest presentation, he's imparted an almost universal quality or appeal to his canvases so that they may be understood by any sort of people in any times. Some have predicted that New Orleans will come to be known as the home of Will Stevens, the Times-Picayune.
One doesn't know all the reasons why we don't know more about him. And his maturation took place right during World War II, for example. So those are probably some of the reasons. Also, it is true if you're not living and working and continually in New York, no matter how much you might be admired in New Orleans or Houston or Shreveport or Cincinnati, that still doesn't quite cut the mustard for people writing about what's going on in New York.
He liked the humble environment. He did not paint the French Quarter, okay? The most obvious and paintable place in New Orleans did not attract his interest. He went down to the Batteur, to the levees, where the common man who struggles with nature, the flooding, and the day-to-day life that he would eke from those existence would be his subject matter for the most part, okay? So then when he comes into the mountains, when he is interested in architecture, it's the log cabin. It's the mountaineer, the person who, again, is man and nature working together and in trying to find a harmony in an existence.
These bayou people have never tried to subdue nature, but have harmonized their lives with natural order. I feel the same way about the mountain people. But on a whole, our Western culture has ignored the Oriental point of view. In the West, the idea is that man is superior. I think that's a mistake.
Will Henry Stevens retired from Newcomb College in 1948 and went to Vevey in Indiana, his original home along the Ohio River. He was continuing to paint in the sort of more and more of the abstract, but also very much more interjecting in that certain sort of feelings for Chinese and Japanese art. He was feeling on the verge of a new burst of activity. On the other hand, he was suffering from illness. He had leukemia. He died within a year. So we will never know what he would have done if he'd been able to live another decade or so. He was apparently a very gentle person, an elfin spirit. Even that painting that Pat Trevino did of Will Henry Stevens shows him as almost like a woodland creature.
That gift that Stevens had, or his desire to communicate what nature was about, both in realism and in abstraction, touches people. And I feel that that's why Stevens is important.
One can only look at the amount of work he produced to realize that he was always thinking about his work. And maybe we know more about him by looking at these rich, beautiful colors that he created.
I still think of him a great deal, and I think he was the most lasting experience I had here in what he taught me, and also my admiration for him as a person. Very quiet, very humble, but very deep. And I still treasure those years with him as a teacher and as a friend.